Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's Writer's Lunch. And today we're going to be talking about query letters. So, one of the things that a lot of people do with query letters is they've written an entire book. The book is complete, 100,000 words, sometimes 70,000 words, somewhere in there, hopefully not 300,000. But they're trying to send this thing out to an agent, and their entire book, all of those months of effort, is being judged by this one query letter, and that can be really frustrating. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we do, I have a couple of housekeeping things that I want to go over. By the way, I'm Shannon. I am one of the lead, excuse me, I'm the lead editor with Eyetooth Editing. And apologies. We're going to talk about a couple of things before we get started, so bear with me. So first off, this is going to be streamed on a couple of different platforms. So if you're watching this on Facebook and you found this through a post, then one of the things that I want you to do is if you have questions or comments, go ahead and add those to the video and not the post that you found this in, because I may not see the post. So if you want me to answer anything, if you've got any burning questions, they need to go into the video. Speaking of which, let me know that you're actually watching. Say hi, give me a like, one of those things, so that I know this is actually going out live. Really appreciate that. And if you found us through ulterior means, besides Facebook, that's where a lot of our stuff happens. So I would totally suggest finding Houston Independent Authors on Facebook. You can find us at Houston Authors and following our page, or joining our Houston Independent Authors community group there on Facebook. Those things are all awesome. Okay. So I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. It doesn't look like it. So let me go ahead and start presenting, because I've got a lot to get through, especially for just 30 minutes. All right, let's go. Okay, hopefully you're able to see my presentation now. And if you can, that would be awesome. What we're going to be talking about, as I said before, if you just joined us, is query letters. And query letters are a thorn in a lot of people's sides, unfortunately. It can be really difficult to write a query letter. It can be really difficult to figure out what an agent wants from your query letter, and it's easy to make some mistakes. So I've actually set this up into a couple of different sections. But first, again, about me. I am a developmental editor with Eyetooth Editing. I'm one of the founders of Houston Independent Authors here in Houston. I am a 2019 municipal liaison for NaNoWriMo. We're actually doing Camp Nano right now. And if you do follow Houston Independent Authors, or you're part of the Houston NaNoWriters group, you'll see some write-ins that we're having for Camp Nano this month. So go check that out if you haven't already. And then I'm also one of the 2020 coordinators for the Editorial Freelancers Association Houston chapter. So that's a lot about me. I know you're not here for that. I know you're here to learn about querying. So first things first, what is the purpose of your query letter? You might think it's about teaching your audience, the agent, all about your book. You might think that it's to introduce them to yourself and prove to them that you're an awesome person so that they want to sell your book. Neither of those things is truly right, even though you're going to have elements of both in there. Really, what your query letter is going to do is it's going to teach or show the agent or the acquisitions editor, if you're looking at a small press, how they're going to sell and market your book. And so whenever you're sending stuff in to an agent, it can be really hard not to look at this as like a personal endeavor, something that is being done that reflects on you as a person. And the answer is really not. If you send something to an agent and perhaps a lot of what they're looking at getting right now for this season is paranormal romance, and what you're writing is urban fantasy that's not urban, that isn't romantic, then they can't sell your book. It has nothing to do with you or even the validity of that book that you've written. It's that right now what they're looking for to market isn't what you've written. So it's not about you. And I think it's really hard for especially new authors to look at this process and say it's completely impersonal. But generally speaking, for the most part, it is. So you can be rejected for tons of reasons, many of them completely outside of your control. And that's just part of the game. So as much as it sucks, that is part of the process. So what you want to do is try to avoid um, doing things that will get you booted from Go, even if what you're doing has the right stuff that that agent wants at this particular time. So let's go ahead on and talk about those. All right, so first things first, and I apologize, my dog is over here looking for attention. You want to focus on some do's. What should you do? You do want to check your submission guidelines from your agent, whether you found them on Twitter, looking for a specific manuscript on the manuscript wish list, or if you're on submission grinder or anything like that. You want to check each and every single agent's submission guidelines because they might be different. And even if they have a contact form on their website, it may not be the right place to actually send information. Or even if there's a contact us email address, that may not be the right place. So check the submission guidelines. And you also want to look at a couple of other things. Before we go too far, again, this is an example, and if you can't see it, sorry, my dog is really looking for attention, guys. If you can't see it, what it says is this particular author, excuse me, this particular agent accepts email and snail mail queries. This is unusual. A lot of people don't take snail mail anymore. And if they do, you need to send this thing down here at the bottom. It says SASE, which is a self-addressed stamped envelope. And that means that they can send your stuff back to you without having to pay for it. If you don't send this person an SASE, they're just going to dump your stuff in the trash because they're not going to pay postage for you and 1,000 other authors looking to get attention. So for this particular person, you can send it through email or you can send it in the mail, and you should expect it to take up to 2 months for them to get back to you. And that's unfortunately not unusual. That happens, but you can also send it to them via email. Okay. You can send it to them via email. And if you do, they don't want you to send an attachment. They've said it straight out, don't send an attachment. And they want you to have a specific title so that this particular person knows what it is that you're sending. It's not going to get confused with other people. They probably have a preset in their email so that if anything says query, it goes into a particular section of their inbox so that they're able to, set up a organization system. And if you don't do this, your thing is going to slip through the cracks. So they've given you some really specific guidelines on how to do it. And if you didn't read it, you may not know that's what you're supposed to do. Now look at this other set of guidelines. This particular person, Kat, she does not want you to send stuff via snail mail. And she wants you to send the query to the email specified on each agent's page. This is from an actual agency that has multiple agents. And if you don't, then they're probably not going to, sorry about that, they're probably not going to respond to you. And it's the same kind of thing. They want the word query in there, and there's a reason for that. And if you are going to send stuff in, you want to make sure that you're sending your query letter, the first 5 pages of your manuscript, and a short synopsis. And if you don't do those things, then you're going to run afoul of these people. Now, if you look back, this particular agent, the previous one, said to just send the first 10 pages of your manuscript along with your query letter. He doesn't want your synopsis yet. He wants to go through and read your stuff, and then he'll let you know if he wants to bother with getting your synopsis. And it may be that he does later on, and it may be that he doesn't if he's not going to respond to you. But he doesn't want a big, bulky, package of stuff coming in the mail from you that he may or may not want to read. And it's really up to the individual agent or agency. But if you're not paying attention, you may send the wrong stuff. And again, this second example, they only wanted 5 pages. So if you're not paying attention, you may run afoul. I see a couple of people are saying hi over on Facebook. Hi, Sean. I'm going to switch over to my Vimeo and see if we've got any comments. Thank you guys for joining us. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah, when you're looking at stuff like submission guidelines, pay close attention and organize yourself well, because everybody wants something perhaps just a little bit different. And again, they may say, you know, only contact us via submission grinder or another aggregate site. And so if you're sending something to their contact me page, it may actually be going to the webmaster and you're going to get lost. So those are easy ways to accidentally mess up and send yourself into a rejection pile, even if that rejection pile is just an error, you know, inbox for somebody else. Okay, so again, remember, check your submission guidelines. And then the next thing that you really want to do is look at the agent's asks. And so you may see this on their website, or you might see this on their Twitter, or somewhere else where they've got like social media. They'll be asking for, you know, a particular style. So for this one over here, for commercial fiction, this particular person wants you to have close POV, well-developed, distinct characters. If you're writing science fiction, which I kind of focus on, they want space opera or something dark and twisty. So if you're writing urban fantasy set on Earth, then you maybe shouldn't be sending your stuff over to this person because they're probably going to reject it. Oh, I'm totally lying. Look, see, low epic fantasy, dark urban fantasy. So they actually would be able to take it. But if you hadn't read, like I didn't just now, then you may be knocking yourself out. But if you're trying to send something that doesn't reflect what that person is actively trying to sell, they're going to go ahead and reject you. And again, it's not personal. This is them trying to make a profit, trying to make a sale. And so the people that they're working to send their manuscripts to aren't buying the kind of thing that you write, then this isn't actually the particular agent that you should be contacting. It's not so much you're not the right for them, but they're not right for you. They can't do for you what you want them to do. So check that out. Make sure that when you go to their website that you look and say, okay, I 100% match what they're looking for. Okay, here's another one. This is a tweet. Thinklings Books, I don't really know them, but I thought this was really cute. They're very specific. They want a family saga about about fairies that incorporates the themes of mental illness. So if this hits you to a T, which you might be one out of 100,000 or 500,000 or a million writers who has actually written this particular story, then you should submit. But if you've written a family saga that incorporates mental illness but has no fairies in it, you should not. If you've written a family saga about fairies but there's no mental illness, you should not. They have given you extremely specific asks. And if you're not paying attention and you send them other stuff, you're probably going to go on the rejection pile because that's not what they're looking for. And there's probably a reason they want this particular thing. There's some stuff that you're not privy to as to why they've chosen these, why they think that this is the kind of book that's going to sell shortly. But if you're not doing what they're looking for, they're going to go ahead and reject you. So when you see these things, what you should do, especially when you're looking at your query letters, is target, target, target. So if they've given you a specific indication of what they want, it's not a bad idea to use their exact verbiage, especially if it rings true for what you've written. And you want to make sure that anything that you're sending out is personalized to that particular agent or agency. So dear agent will possibly be something that makes people like bored or angry. Whereas if you say, you know, dear person's name, they know that you've actually looked for them. And if you list the actual agency that they worked for, or any other authors that you think you're like that also have them as an agent, then that shows that you've really done your homework. It's more personalized and it'll get you more attention. And then you want to polish both the content of the pitch and the actual words of the pitch. And what that means is you want to make sure what you're saying is as efficient as possible and that you haven't made any like very obvious spelling or grammar errors. And I know some people are much more of a stickler for that kind of thing. A couple of agents that I know, there's just one or two and it's not that big a deal. But if they're seeing rampant problems with the typing or the writing, or it looks like maybe you don't, you're not paying enough attention in some of the mistakes that you're making, then they'll probably skip you over because they expect your manuscript to look the same. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you're sticking to a page or less, regardless of who you're talking to. Generally speaking, they'll say a 300-word limit. And if you go over it, they'll boot you. So the do nots, these are some things that'll easily get you kicked out, that they're easy mistakes to make, but they're also easy to fix. If you have an agent that you're going to talk to, don't misspell their name. Don't accidentally do a copy and paste and send something to a second agent that has the first agent's name on it. If you're sending something to John Doe, you don't want to address Jane Doe as that. If you submit incorrectly, which is kind of what we've been talking about, if you've done something wrong or outside of the list of they gave you of how they want you to submit or what they want you to submit, that can make them angry. And then if you add crazy flourishes or call the agent the wrong gender, those are things that'll just piss people off on like a personal level. And it's a great way to get your story thrown in the trash, which is unfortunate because, again, it doesn't have anything to do with how good your book is or even how marketable your book is. You've just made a really bad first impression. So do not do this. Dear Mr. Candace. So no, which I don't even know if that's the last name. I read you like True Life Mysteries in my my book, The Gong of Mr. Kung Fu, with an extra space in it, is like a true life mystery, except it happened in my head. So it's not a true life mystery. It's 300,000 words. You'll never sell this book. Of Knock Your Socks Off. Don't believe me? My mom loved it. I found your email using a reverse business owner search because I wanted to reach out to you directly, and your email wasn't on your website, all one word. So there's all sorts of things. This is a preposterous example, but there's all sorts of things people do that are similar. Oh, by the way, if you didn't notice, it has a green background. Everything is highlighted in blue, and the writing is in yellow, which is crazy. Don't ever do anything like that. Even if it's attention getting because it's bizarre looking, that's bad attention. Like not all attention is good attention. So avoid, again, misgendering your particular agent. And it can be kind of tricky, especially with some names that can be both. I mean, if you send something to me as a Shannon, you're probably going to presume that I'm a girl, but I know a ton of Shannons that are, that are men. And if you're calling them Miss, they might get a little bit irritated. And then there are people who have names that are just unusual, and you make a presumption and you're wrong. So it's better to not put any gender, especially since people sometimes don't ascribe to one particular gender, even if their name traditionally falls into that. And so it's easy to piss people off. And that's like a big pet peeve across the board. So what do you want to make sure your query letter has? You want to make sure that you're at least addressing your main character, and you're going to need to describe them as a particular type. A particular type of character. You don't want to say a bunch of stuff about their backstory, but if they are an anthropologist, if they are a baker, if they are a Katrina survivor, if they are a label, then you're going to go ahead and put that there. And it's usually a pretty good idea to also give a full, a name to that person. You don't want to say, so and so without saying Karen or John or Bob or, Jaime or whatever it is that character's name is. You want to give a name because people associate better with people than they do with an idea. And then you want to talk about the stakes and the major conflict. And you need to do this in a relatively short period of time. And if you don't, though, the person who's on the other end who's reading this submission, they're not going to understand what this book is about. And you also want to make sure that you include things like the market that this is going to go in. If you're not 100% sure, you're genre bending, then you can go ahead and put that this is soft science fiction with romance. Or if this is primarily a paranormal romance with some soft science fiction, you can indicate that. But you're going to try to figure out where your primary market, who are the people that are reading this? If they like this, what else will they like? And that'll kind of tell you which one you should, if you're not sure. And the same thing with genre. So those two things can be a little bit, different. But if your market is, YA, or your genre is YA, who's going to read this? And if people like, say, The Hunger Games, will they like this? Well, that's a particular market inside the genre where you might have people who are interested in YA dystopia that don't like The Hunger Games, but like a different kind of book that will like yours, because yours is more like that. And you also want to make sure you do the word count. If you don't put the word count in, it can be really difficult to figure out if you're writing the kind of thing that agent sells. So if you're writing novellas, then the market for that is probably a little bit different than the market for, say, a full-length novel. If you write short stories, you can still look for an agent to try to get those short stories in magazines. But the people who are really focused in on that may not be the ones that do full-length novels either. So you want to make sure they know your word count, because it'll impact where you could possibly place this particular book or story. And then they also want relevant information about the author. And so this can be really hard, because especially people who have a background in a different industry than inside of the publishing industry. They'll start putting a bunch of information about themselves and things they've done that maybe don't have a lot to do with this book itself. So if you're going to talk about how you won a National Honor Society prize back when you were in junior high or high school, it may not be super relevant to your vampire erotica. But if you by chance used to do special effects on low budget horror movies or science fiction movies, that might be something that's an actual selling point because it's relevant to the genre that you're writing in. So, what are some common mistakes? I kind of talked about the talking about yourself thing because one of the things that agents want you to do is give them a paragraph or two about yourself. But again, you want to try to make sure that you're focusing in on things that are relevant to them being able to sell your product. And it's sometimes better to do less than more, especially if what your what your background is maybe isn't super duper aligned with what you're writing right now. So in this particular, if you can't see it, it's this greeting agent. I'm a 72-year-old accountant with a long history of working with Fortune 500 companies. And that time I won an AICPA gold medal distinction twice. I'm a professor at Derby University. I've talked to a lot of interesting people by email. I know a thing or two about human nature. We're like 4 or 5 sentences in before he even says, I've spent 15 long years, which don't ever say that, 15 long years, and have finally completed my first race car werewolf mystery entitled Shifting Gears. So, the person who's actually starting to read this is going to have to get through your CV before they realize that you've written this very genre, like dorky, cute race car werewolf novel called Shifting Gears. And it's something they're probably not going to sit through to get there. And what you should have led with is this very last sentence, except again, strike that 15 long years thing. So this is kind of an example. Yours probably isn't that big, but think about it. If they're an agent and they're trying to figure out how to sell this book, what about you makes that possible? And so even if it's something more along the lines of you started reading Bram Stoker's Dracula when you were 7 years old, and that's led you into a lifetime of love, that's a little bit better than talking about maybe where your degree is, especially if your degree isn't relevant to what you're writing. Now, if your degree is relevant or your background is relevant, you definitely want to add that. So, for instance, I know somebody who's written a couple of books with Buzz Aldrin for kids. They can definitely add that to whatever it is that they're trying to sell in the future because they've got name recognition and that background is super relevant to anything else they write in sci-fi. And then just remember that there's things that maybe you want to brag about or you want to talk about, but they're not super relevant to your query letter because that's not what this is here for. So it looks like my co-host Sean has added a couple of things. Mention the research if you've done it; it's relevant. That's very true. If you have done research, again, don't say that you have, you've done so many hours worth of research necessarily, so they need to pay attention to you. But you can talk about who you spoke to and who you contacted, especially if those names are a big deal. So say that you used Elon Musk somehow as somebody that you were able to talk to get research on your book. That's name brand recognition, and you should definitely address that. Um, but say you talk to your mom and your mom doesn't have a big name, then it may not be, as good a way to do it. So what is the purpose of your query letter? Again, it is to get the agent information to tell them how to sell your book. What it isn't is a way for you to talk about effort or time sunk. So if you've come across as, kind of aggressive or maybe a little bit weird because you're saying, I've spent over 100,000 hours writing this book, so it has to be good. That's a misnomer. It's not really true, but it also tells the agent that you're taking this time association and demanded that means value. And oftentimes that's not the case, but it also, I'm not going to read a book just because somebody spent a long time on it. I want to read a book because it's interesting to me as a reader. The agent knows that. And so if your first argument is, I took a long time to write this book, it's not really a good selling point. And again, books that take a super duper long time to write, even though we've spent that time, often they're not our best work. And so it's not a selling point. You should not be bragging, with a couple of exceptions. We kind of already talked about research. If you know somebody who's willing to help you sell the book that has name recognition, if you have a certain number of followers on social media that are already engaging with you, especially if you can indicate what your engagement rate is, those are things to actually indicate. But if you're just bragging because you've done something inside of your life that you think is important or cool, then this may not be the way to sell that story, especially again if it's not relevant to the genre. Now, say you're an accountant and the book that you're writing is on how to become an accountant. Well, that's totally relevant. Your background, your schooling, all of that really works with that genre. But again, if you're writing vampire erotica or werewolf race car mysteries, that background may not be super duper important to there. All right. You also don't want to talk about anecdotes in your life unless they're somehow relevant. So if you're like, I got this idea when I was on vacation in Colorado back in 2006. I also broke my leg and it was pretty amazing. If you're spending your 300-word limit on telling somebody a story about your life, they're probably going to read about 2 sentences of it and then scroll on by. You also don't want to use this time to expound on the backstory, the role building, or theme. And this can be the hardest thing, especially because we're so wrapped up in the content of the story that it's hard to back up and say, okay, I'm just going to write a generalized explanation of the plot. I'm just going to write a generalized explanation of who my character is. But in all honesty, if you have to tell a story for somebody to start your story, they're not going to do it. They're not going to read through the backstory. And if you have to explain your entire world for them to get your world, then it's not going to work, which is one of the reasons why people tend to focus in on metaphors. You don't necessarily have to, but it's good for you to be able to say, okay, well, this is like Tim Burton's Batman, but Batman is a woman. Because somebody can already envision it, even if it's not exactly right. If it's along the same lines, it works. But people also will go into really weird things. So it might be like Tim Burton's Batman, but Batman is a woman, and it's set on Mars, and they're aliens, and they all look like clowns. And you got to the point where it's so muddled that they're not going to quite get it. So if you have a concept that's a high concept, go ahead and talk about it in the best way possible. But if you're trying to use those metaphors or that name recognition with other books or other movies or media that's popular right now, but you can't quite get it to be truly reflective, it's probably better not to. The other things you don't want to do, you don't want to complain about other books or insult people. So I mean, if you have something that says, I just read Harry Potter and I thought it sucked and I can do better, then you probably are going to get that query letter thrown in the trash, because nobody wants to hear something that was a dramatically amazing success, like shit talked, excuse my French. And the person who's writing this, they need to recognize validity where validity is. They may not have enjoyed that story, but at the same time, it's not really a good idea to say, hey, this thing that made the author a ton of success, that an entire generation recognizes as part of their cultural upbringing, is a POS and I can do better, because more than likely you cannot, depending on what you're looking at as success. And having name brand recognition, having that become part of the culture, Harry Potter's part of the culture, that's really, really successful for a book. So don't complain about other books. Don't insult people in that particular thing. Like if you're going to say mean things about J.K. Rowling, it's probably not the place to do it, even if you don't agree with, say, politics or something else. And you can think these things, but again, you need to make sure that you're not doing that. Or if you're like, I know the liberal media will hate what I have to say, more than likely that's not going to run well. It's not going to go past an agent well, unless you've already kind of set up hey, my market is people who feel this particular way. You also don't want to outline the whole novel. Your synopsis is there if they ask for it to help you do that. And again, it's a synopsis, so it's not a full outline, but you don't want to send in an outline as part of your query letter or behind your query letter. And you don't want to ask questions. And I know that's kind of weird, but there's 2 ways you can ask questions that are wrong. And so the first one is at the end of your query letter for you to ask information about who else the agent has represented, or how successful they are, or what their conversion rates are, or anything like that. Because what you're actually telling them is that you're a difficult client. You haven't even really gotten in the door yet, and you're already kind of demanding their attention and time. Or even if they liked what you've written, the amount of engagement that they're going to have to provide you in order to work with you is higher than what they would have already been doing if they just said, hey, send me more. And so that might be the difference between you actually getting a follow-up letter from them or email from them and them saying like, nah, it's not worth it. And there's another way to ask questions. When we were little, at least a lot of us, and we were learning how to write a persuasive paragraph. One of the things that we got taught in like third grade was to ask a question at the very beginning of whatever it was that you're writing. And it's a great way to invite people in. This is actually false, especially when it comes to query letters, because if you can say no to a question, then this is no longer relevant to you. And so for a lot of us, you remember, hey, do you want to make more money? We all do the Sally Struthers thing. Everybody wants to make more money. It's very rare that you're going to find somebody who doesn't want to make more money. But when you're writing a query letter and you say, have you ever wondered or have you ever thought about? The answer is probably no. And so you've actually given them an invitation to leave. And so you don't want to do that. So here's an example of that. So, dear Francis Barrington, I have written a book that seems perfect for XOXO agency. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if God were a squirrel? If they have never wondered what it was like if God were a squirrel, then they're going to walk past what you've just written. And that means that you've lost an opportunity, even if your book is really interesting, even if they're looking for weird fiction and the idea itself is interesting, you've probably lost their attention. So don't do that. And here's like an updated version of it. And I'm not going to read all of it, but hopefully you can see it. If not, I will try to send out or add like at least a PowerPoint version. I'm sorry, at least a PDF version of my PowerPoint if I can get that on Facebook for you guys. But in this one, the person says, hey, this is who I am. I've written this high concept 100,000 word science fiction novel in which God is a squirrel. He stashes away his emotions, knowledge, and morality in every human being, storing them safely on Earth for an epic battle that was foretold. Well, that day has come. He gets down there, people are missing. Oh, and he has this new problem. So this actually, even though I've kind of run through it really quickly, it it actually opens up into the information. You've already got a character everybody recognizes in some form or fashion of God, but now they're in some way or form a squirrel. And then when they get to Earth, they have both squirrel problems and God problems. And there's this element, this overarching element of like this demonic cosmic war. And if you've written it like this, you've gotten across the majority of the stakes inside of the story very quickly, instead of say focusing on whether or not you're an accountant, focusing in on a big amount of background that perhaps isn't relevant to this particular story, or by giving an opportunity for that agent to say no. And so whenever you're looking at your stuff, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally inviting opportunities for the agent to say no. So again, when you're looking through stuff, you want to make sure you're not talking about how much effort or time it took you to write this. If you have done research or you've been researching for a few years and you talked to these XYZ big people, that's one thing. You don't want to brag about yourself unless it's relevant. Say you're writing a action or a Western or something like that, and one time you saved Matthew McConaughey's life and he's already going to go and tell producers in Hollywood that your story is all right, all right, all right. You can probably add that to your query letter. But if you save your neighbor's life and he's going to tell 5 friends that he likes your book, that may not be worth it. Again, you don't want to tell anecdotes about your life unless they're super relevant and helpful in showing the agent how to sell your book. You don't want to expound on the backstory, world building, or theme because you have very little room to get them interested. And those things often, unfortunately, are not. If you come in and say, I've written a book about love and hate, that's both the theme, but it's also super duper vague. And it's not something that's going to grab attention because even if we have vastly different stories, I may be writing a book about love and hate too. And the person down the road might be writing a book about love and hate. And the person that's their pen pal might be writing a book about love and hate. So that's not really helpful in describing to the agent what this book is truly about, even if it's your underlying theme. And then again, you don't want to complain or be super duper negative. That sends a bad first impression. You definitely don't want to outline the whole novel. And you don't want to ask questions until you make sure that they're interested in you. And at that point, you'll have an opportunity to actually converse with them directly. Okay, and again, always remember, even if you hit a rejection, even if you've sent out 4 or 5 of these and you're hitting rejection, it's not personal. The whole purpose of this query letter is to teach the agent or acquisitions editor how to sell your book. And so, if for whatever reason they don't think they can sell your book because they aren't selling the kind of story you write, because unfortunately they just bought a story like yours, because what you're writing is weird fiction and they don't really try to sell weird fiction, those aren't personal. You just need to keep searching for the agent that does like it. And does like it means they think they can sell that book, not they like you as a human being or that they reject you as a human being. And again, when you first start, it can be really hard not to look at rejection as a rejection of a whole person instead of just this concept. And so one of the biggest things that people do when they write stuff is they make the mistake of taking it personal. So if you take anything from this, it is to remember, excuse me, that this process is not personal. But whatever you can do to not give that agent or that acquisitions editor, again, if you're looking at a medium or small press publisher, an opportunity to say no, the better you'll come across. Okay, so I'm going to see if there are any questions. And I apologize because I'm going to look at like 6 different places. Oh, okay. I've been missing some stuff on video. Hello, Steve. Hello, Diane. Hello, Brianne. um, if you were having problems, technical difficulties, this will be released later. You should be able to come back to the Vimeo site in about an hour and watch it. Same thing with Facebook. Once it gets rendered, it'll come back to you. More than likely, the sound cutting out is something wrong with the with the internet. I apologize. So let me go to the Q&A over here. And okay, I'm not seeing that. If you do have any questions, go ahead and send those over to me. Sean's written, do you want to read my book? I probably do. I love reading good books, Sean. Unfortunately, I am not an acquisitions editor at this time, so I can't tell you if me reading your book and liking it will help you. But at the same time, I am super interested to see what you're writing. Couple of other things that are going through. So checking on it. Okay, so I do see one question. And the main thing is, how do you know what to write to a particular agent or how to change your pitch? So again, if you're going to go back and look at the agent's website, they may work with an agency, but they should have a particular page listed for them. And it'll tell you what they're taking specifically, because the agency as a whole may take a range of different genres or want a range of different things, but their particular page should tell you what they specifically, with this particular agent at this agency, wants to see. And so if they've listed out a specific term that encompasses your story, then you're going to go ahead and use that term. The other thing you can look at is its manuscript wish list, which is hashtag MSWL on Twitter. There's also a web page for that, which is manuscript wish list. You can just Google it and you can find it. And when you look on there, you're going to see a range of different agents, and you'll be able to figure out if any of them, by keywords, are doing the same thing that you want. Or if you're looking in the actual manuscript wish list website, they have a handy dandy search bar where you can go in and plug in your major genre. So if you're writing science fiction, you can see all the people who are taking science fiction. You can also see if they're taking if they have open submission policies or not, because some agents will be listed but they're not taking submissions currently, or they don't do they don't do blind submissions. But when you do see that kind of thing, or if you see anything on Twitter or anything like that where they're like, hey, I want this very specific thing, it's not a bad idea, especially if you fit that prescribed box that they've given you, to go ahead and list where you found them and that you have exactly what they're looking for. Oh, Sean's written back, that was the first sentence of your bad query. Oh no, I hope your queries look better now. So do you want to read my book? Yeah, so without any previous information, if that's what you wrote, so do you want to read my book? Unless you had previous communication with this person and somehow that's an inside joke, you don't do it. I hope you guys have learned a lot from this. If somehow I've missed your question, I will endeavor to go back and find that and then answer it and check one more time across all of the different things that we're selling, or excuse me, that we're sharing this on. And while I'm looking, I do want to remind you that we have a post presentation meet. Um, I'm going to ask that my IT guy. Oh, okay, I found a couple others. What can you give us on tips? Sorry, Diana's asking, how about response times from agents and acquisitions editors? So as you see, some of them, they gave you information inside of their submission guidelines on how long you should expect to wait for them to get back to you. And so if you see that, then you should follow their particular guidelines. So unfortunately, if you're seeing something that says it's going to take 6 months, you don't want to go back and bug them after 3. But there should be an expectation, even though these guys said the one that I showed you was 5 to 8 weeks, I would expect to be at least 3 months before you hear back from anybody. And it's not a terrible idea to just say, I'm just curious when you're going to get back to me, but don't do it the next week after you sent your full submission packet in. And when you send your information in, again, sometimes you'll get an automatic email response, and it'll give you an idea of how long it's going to take them. I would not suggest direct messaging anybody on Twitter or calling them out, even if that's not what your intention is. People don't want to be bugged on social media unless they've actually said, hey, how about this? And then another thing you can do, this is kind of devious. Occasionally editors will do an ask an editor, like an AMA session. And if you find one that's doing one of those, then you can ask them directly there, how long does it take for you or your agency to get back to you? That's like the one example of where it's okay, because they may do that. And then when you ask, Diana, one of the best things to do is say, I sent in, reply on the same thread if you can, and be very polite. Don't, I've been waiting for you. That's really a bad way to present yourself, but say, I sent this in 3 months ago. I'm just trying to ensure that this hasn't gotten missed. This is the title of my book. Thank you for your consideration. Be very polite. And then how would you recommend to research agents? Publishing's Marketplace is a good one. Again, there's a couple of other places. I think it's Agent Marketplace. Give me just a second, I can tell you. Because that actually answers no, I apologize. So there's Query Marketplace, which you have to pay to get into, but that'll actually give you information. Publishers Marketplace. Oh, I'm totally off. Publishers Marketplace, which is publishersmarketplace.com, and you have to you have to actually get an account with Publishers Marketplace. And that's unfortunate because it costs a little bit of money. But when you go in there, you can see what everybody is. What their rates are, because that's more of a professional side of things. So you can use Publishers Marketplace when you're querying to find out more about the different agents. And then it's usually, if I remember correctly, it's about $25 a month. I think it might be $250 for a year or something like that. But that'll give you a lot more of the statistics or the statistical data that some of us who are more math brained liked, as well, as far as what those rates are. And then dirt on agents. Unfortunately, I don't have anything that's super awesome right now that's dirt on agents. Occasionally, you'll see people talking on Twitter, and then there's certain scam alert websites. But you see a little bit less in the sort of crazy stuff with agents as you would maybe like the boutique and low quality publishers. More than likely, if you can find other clients that are successful on their page, then they're okay. But if you're not seeing information about their other clients on any of their social media or their public facing websites, then you may want to avoid them unless they say straight out, I've just started and this is my background and I've been an intern at this particular thing. And sometimes you'll see that where they've just become an agent, but they were an agent's assistant all throughout college for the last 5 years. And so they've made connections and they're probably worthwhile. But if you're not seeing any information on their website or on their social media about people that they've just contracted with, or that book has gone to a big publisher or anything like that, then that's a big red flag. And if they're promising to make you a millionaire, that's a big red flag. Agents are not going to make any promises that they can't keep if they're valid. All right. Um, I think I've answered all your questions. And again, so a couple things. If you're not following Houston Independent Authors right now on Facebook, go ahead and do so. Again, we're at Houston Authors, and join us in a few minutes. I've gone about 15 minutes long. Join us in the Hangouts meet. You should have a link here shortly on how to get to there. And we'll see you then. Thank you guys. Oh, if you have any other questions, by the way, feel free to email me. I'm not super restrictive. I'm point@Eyetooth editing. And if for whatever reason you want any other information or you'd like an actual editor to check out your submission packet before you send it, go ahead and let me know. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.